We see a few people on YouTube and TV who call body language or behavior analysis pseudoscience. I'm rated the #1 body language expert in the world, and I actually agree with a lot of what they have to say. We live in a world where there are entire YouTube channels dedicated to promoting the idea that the earth is flat, and we have millions and millions of people who trust Joe Rogan more than they trust the actual news. How do we get to a place where this could even exist in modern times like this? Psychology has seen its fair share of misinformation. And in the past few hundred years, people widely believed that facial shapes and being able to read lumps on somebody's head can determine their future and their behaviors. This was real science back then. And I'm not kidding, people actually believe this. My goal here isn't to bash anybody. I'm going to explore this with you, and I'm going to perform a little investigation with you into what's really going on. And I think you're going to be as stunned as I was. This is the DSM. It's rooted in decades of science, peer-reviewed research. This is what psychologists use to diagnose somebody. It's the gold standard. And even then, any psychologist you talk to will tell you that it's not perfect, and many more are going to tell you that it's flawed beyond understanding. This book is the American Psychological Association Handbook of Nonverbal Communication. It's rooted in science with even more peer-reviewed research and studies that date back hundreds of years. Why is there a scientifically based document like this produced by the American Psychological Association if nonverbal communication is pseudoscience? That's right, this is pretty much gestures, facial expressions. A lot of this stuff is what body language is rooted in. This is a book by John Truby. It's called The Anatomy of Story, and this book is arguably one of the most respected and highly acclaimed books on writing good stories that exist today. Even professionals reference this book when they're writing screenplays for major Hollywood movies. It's essentially the Bible of storytelling and story writing. But something was off when I read this book. I went back to the DSM and saw all these references and citations and studies that were done. Loads, endless lists of doctors who contributed to all this research. But when I flipped to the back of this book, there's no peer-reviewed studies. What? How can this be widely accepted by almost every writer in the world, and there's no research to back this up? Here is the core problem. People trust this book by John Truby because of results, and people trust John Truby because he has truly become a master at what he does. But John Truby didn't submit these writing techniques to a lab to see if they could be measured. So is this book pseudoscience? Has John Truby been lying to me? No, that would be stupid. Using science principles to criticize art is what that would be. What if being a master in behavior profiling is also an art that requires skill? Let me give you an exercise really quick. Have you ever checked the weather app? I certainly do all the time, and I know that meteorologists are not giving me cold, hard facts. Predicting the weather is based in tons and tons of science, but the act of predicting the weather is more like an art form that deals in likelihood instead of fact. So when my weather app says it's going to be 14 mile per hour winds out of the northeast and somehow they speed up to 19 miles per hour, I don't call the meteorologist a scam artist or a pseudoscientist. So why would a small group of people online try to convince you that there's no difference between art and science? And before we dig into that, I'd like to pose another idea here that they aren't just confusing art and science, they're also confusing information and skill. As a quick exercise, which of these two people is happy? You guessed right, because you didn't have to guess at all. It's written in your DNA. Nonverbal communication is programmed into us at birth. It's in our brains long before we even know what spoken language is. And we all acknowledge this, but there's still people out there trying to persuade you to think it isn't true. And I always wonder what their motive could be. Every animal on our planet has a set of specific behaviors to respond to stuff. These animals don't go to training to learn this, when we openly acknowledge that we can tell when a dog is scared or when a tiger is sneaking up on something. And we do that without consulting a bunch of peer-reviewed research to make that determination. Somehow, we say humans don't apply to any of this due to an inability to replicate behavior in a closed laboratory or on some Excel spreadsheet at a university. If we could distill what's most effective for behavior in a lab, there would be no ultimate fighting championship, no chess games, because skill would not matter at all. Somebody would say, these are the exact recipe to win, and then you would just keep doing that. And then we could show some fighting moves to an amateur, and they would go win the UFC. Skill and experience play a major role, and academia seems to ignore this. I won't pretend to understand why, but it's hard to measure, and some say that these folks place a higher importance on simple data because their actual skill is lacking, so they believe education and skill are the exact same thing. Let me give you a few examples of confusing art and science, and I want to see if you can spot which one is which. So one of these is going to be art versus science, and one is information versus skill. For the first scenario, I want you to imagine a culinary arts professor making YouTube videos where he tells you not to believe anything that Gordon Ramsay says. How come? Oh, it's because he doesn't have a college degree and the recipes weren't proven in a laboratory. And he tells you the cooking that you're seeing on TV is pseudoscience. After all, it's not proven science. It's just cooking. This one is using science to critique art. So now imagine an economics professor criticizing Jeff Bezos for talking about money because he doesn't have a degree in economics. Learning about money doesn't make you rich. Learning about psychology doesn't even give you a good personality or even good social skills. This is an example of confusing knowledge and skill. Or more simply put, just using knowledge to criticize skill. Science creates wonderful things for art to use, like the development and the invention of nonstick pans and ovens for cooking. Cooking is an art, but it's supported by hundreds of brilliant scientists who made all the tools for professional chefs to use. Behavior profiling is a little bit of science, a lot of art, supported by hundreds of scientists who produce the tools that we use with our experience. Just imagine the guy on the American Chopper TV show. Thousands of people trust their lives to his work and how well he builds motorcycles. And they don't call his motorcycles pseudoscience and ask for credentials and peer-reviewed research. His experience and mastery is what makes it all work. We naturally default as people to trusting skill and experience over education and credentials when things actually matter. Who would make a better interrogator? Somebody with a little tiny bit of on-the-job training and then 25 years of actually doing interrogations? Or someone with almost no experience, but who has the most seminars and certificates from online courses and stuff? One of them has credentials, one of them is an expert. There's a difference. Nobody wants to be a surgeon's first patient, no matter how many certificates they have. So let's examine this chasm between education and information and skill and mastery, this giant space between those things. Would somebody with a PhD in sports physiology defeat Michael Phelps in the Olympics? Would somebody with a PhD in martial arts win the UFC? Would a PhD in family therapy automatically make you an excellent or a wonderful parent? Experience and skill are not the same as education and credentials. Guess who teaches more doctors than anybody else? Nurses. I have got a lot of credentials and certifications, and I credit literally none of them to my rating as the world-leading expert in behavior. I mostly give credit to my well over 30,000 hours of real-world research and experience as an expert. And here's the really weird part about all of this. Skill is so wildly ignored that even in the studies people will use to tell you about deception detection, skill was completely ignored. So instead of getting skilled people into the study, because skill is somehow non-existent, they trained people on lie detection using a little PowerPoint for a few minutes, and then sent them into a room where one student was told to lie and one was told to tell the truth. There's no stakes, nothing real, no threat to the liar, and no skill in the person doing the deception detection. So how is it that serious academics can completely ignore that this is literally nothing like the real world? How can they ignore that skill level plays a massive difference? I'll just let you speculate on this because I'm certainly not pretending to have that figured out. If someone's telling you that one behavior can mean someone is lying, I'd be cautious. If somebody's telling you how to observe behaviors without teaching you about a baseline, I'd be very cautious. You need to look for behavior in clusters. And body language and behavior profiling is not a crystal ball. Just like the weatherman or a doctor, this is an art form that's backed by science, but deals largely in likelihood. So, is there malice here in these people? I don't think so at all. And these are people with tremendous educations in understanding the academic side of human behavior. We need those people. And they, like almost every person in the world, also want to feel like their education's relevant. Universities are just unknowingly training people to ignore skill and expertise and instead default to what's proven in a lab. And this is a mistake that every generation makes. And a lot of us are making it today, even as you watch this. You think science has 100% of everything figured out. And if you've ever studied neuroscience or any kind of medical stuff, you'd realize we have only scratched the surface in our understanding, and science hasn't caught up to everything yet. And there's a tremendous problem that occurs when we treat the unpredictable human psychology and behavior like astronomy or mathematics. Humans are not the same. Skill matters, situations matter, and expertise plays a huge role in how someone develops a behavior profile. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe, and you can learn more by downloading the free training app that's right down here below.